They called me worthless, a weed growing in the shadow of mighty oaks. But when the most powerful dynasty in the realm needed someone to marry their dying son, I raised my hand. Not from kindness, not from duty, but because I understood something they didn't. In a world that devours the powerless, sometimes the only path to survival is becoming the monster they never saw coming. My name is Maya, and this is the story of how I transformed a funeral into a coronation. Before we begin, if you're new to Lotus Tale Studios, hit that subscribe button because we bring you the most compelling stories every single day. Now, let's dive in. The Chen family had dominated the Eastern Territories for 6 generations. Their wealth could finance wars. Their word could topple ministers. Their approval could make or break any family in the empire. My family name was also Chen, but that connection was meaningless. We were a forgotten offshoot, so distantly related to the main family that even their kitchen staff lived more comfortably than we did. 12 of us squeezed into a dilapidated compound with walls so paper-thin you could hear everything, every argument, every sob, every broken dream. My parents, my grandmother who coughed blood into rags she tried to hide, 5 brothers, 3 sisters, and me. Grandmother's illness worsened each winter. My younger siblings fought over who got the larger portion at meals. My father, once a promising scholar, now drowned his failures in rice wine and bitterness. My mother's hands were cracked and bleeding from taking in washing to earn a few extra coins. That's why I attached myself to my cousin like a shadow to its owner. I was 15 when I truly learned the art of survival. Old enough to be useful, young enough to appear harmless and innocent. Lianhua, daughter of the main Chen branch, born with every advantage imaginable, beautiful as moonlight on water, graceful as a willow in breeze. She lived in a palace with 42 rooms and complained it felt confined. She owned 17 silk gowns and whined she had nothing suitable to wear. She wept when the jade in her hairpins wasn't perfectly matched. I became her faithful little puppy, always wagging my tail, always pathetically grateful for whatever scraps fell from her table. In front of her circle of privileged friends from other noble houses, I performed my role flawlessly. The pitiful poor cousin who inspired their pity and made them feel magnanimous. They gave me dresses they'd worn twice and decided looked unflattering. Jewelry with cloudy stones or broken clasps. Hair ornaments that were last season's fashion. I accepted everything with trembling gratitude, praised their generosity until they blushed with pleasure, and whenever possible, I made sure everyone knew how kind and noble they were. They adored the attention. They adored watching me worship them, and in exchange, they kept the gifts flowing steadily. Those discarded dresses, when carefully altered and sold at the market, bought grandmother's medicine and rice for 12 hungry mouths. That damaged jewelry, taken apart with patient fingers and reconstructed with creativity, allowed me to attend social gatherings without looking like the beggar I truly was. As I mended dress after dress, I began sketching, adding embellishments here, redesigning a sleeve there, adjusting a neckline to flatter different body types. My designs attracted notice. Soon, young noble women from various families requested that I design new garments for them. Their servants sewed according to my detailed drawings, and I was compensated with more cast-offs, more connections, more opportunities. I understood my position perfectly. I never crossed invisible boundaries that would invite destructive gossip, never competed with Lianhua directly, never shone so brightly that I became a threat rather than an asset, never gave them reasons to cut me loose. That's how I remained at Lianhua's side, studying music, strategy games, calligraphy, painting, poetry composition, and sophisticated etiquette with her expensive private tutors. I mastered every subject, but only allowed my design talent to show publicly, and even that I kept carefully restrained so Lianhua never felt overshadowed or jealous. My cousin was spoiled and thoughtless, but not intentionally cruel. Thanks to my clothing designs, she became friends with highborn ladies who had previously dismissed her as merely wealthy but lacking refinement. Her social standing climbed dramatically. Her marriage prospects became the most discussed topic in the capital. Then came the announcement that shook the entire empire like an earthquake. Lianhua was engaged to Caiyang Shen, heir to the Duke of Eastern Wind's estate, nephew to the emperor himself, first cousin to the crown prince. Caiyang Shen was the stuff of legends. Handsome enough to inspire poetry, brilliant enough to achieve the highest examination scores at 18, equally skilled with strategy scrolls and sword techniques. People said he could write verses that moved hardened generals to tears and lead cavalry charges that scattered enemies like frightened birds before a storm. He embodied everything ambitious men aspired to become and everything women dreamed of capturing. Lian Hua strutted around like an empress for weeks after the engagement announcement. She ensured everyone within hearing distance knew her future husband was practically royalty. She planned their wedding with the intensity of a military commander preparing for decisive battle. One lazy afternoon, while she reclined on silk cushions and I fanned her with painted feathers, she said something that would haunt me. "Maya, after I marry Kai Yang, I'll arrange a good match for you too. Perhaps I can secure you his half-brother Junwei. His illegitimate, but still the Duke's blood, still the Emperor's nephew. You'd live comfortably and could continue serving me. Even a bastard son of the Duke's household was so impossibly far above my station that I couldn't imagine refusing such an opportunity. Through Lian Hua's rising status, my completely useless father had managed to secure a humble position in the capital's taxation bureau. My older brothers found work as administrative clerks. My younger brothers gained admission to the clan's educational academy. They were no longer bullied mercilessly for being poverty-stricken relations. Finally, they were treated with minimal human dignity. Every night I prayed fervently for Lian Hua's wedding day to arrive quickly. When she ascended to power, I would rise alongside her. But fate must have a twisted sense of humor. When Kai Yang accompanied the Crown Prince on an official inspection tour to the western border territories, bandits launched a coordinated attack on their convoy. The intelligence reports had been catastrophically wrong. Instead of a minor raiding party, they faced 300 mounted warriors with detailed insider knowledge of the Crown Prince's exact route and timing. It was clearly an assassination attempt, carefully planned and brutally executed. Kai Yang threw himself directly in front of the Crown Prince, taking 4 arrows meant for the imperial heir. He killed 23 attackers before collapsing from massive blood loss and a sword wound that nearly severed his right arm completely. They carried him back to the capital barely clinging to life, more corpse than living man. The Duke's mansion summoned every renowned imperial physician in the capital. Each master examined Kai Yang thoroughly, consulted ancient medical texts, prescribed elaborate treatments, and then departed shaking their heads with grim expressions. Lian Hua was consumed with anxiety initially. She dispatched servants daily to inquire discreetly about Kai Yan's condition. She burned expensive incense at temples. She donated substantial silver for monks to pray for his recovery. But as weeks dragged into months and Kai Yang remained deeply unconscious, that anxiety fermented into pure terror. Her network of paid informants brought back disturbing whispers from inside the Duke's household. Kai Yang was dying slowly. The physicians privately admitted he would likely never regain consciousness. And there was talk, hushed and careful talk, about the ancient tradition of ghost marriage. If Kai Yang died before the wedding ceremony, the Duke's family might demand that Lian Hua marry his corpse anyway to preserve family honor and provide his wandering spirit with a companion in the afterlife. In the cruelest interpretations of that tradition, if the bride was young and healthy, she might be strongly encouraged to follow her husband into death, encouraged persuasively with poisoned wine or a silk cord around her throat. Lian Hua collapsed completely when she heard these rumors. She fell violently ill with terror, took to her bed refusing all food and drink. Her mother, my Aunt Qing, born into the illustrious Wang family of the southern provinces, came to visit her distraught daughter. I served tea silently in the corner, desperately trying to make myself invisible and insignificant. Aunt Qing stroked Lian Hua's hair like she was still a frightened child. "Hush now, my precious darling. Hush. You won't have to marry him. Mother will find another solution. Just recover your health and everything will work out fine." I stood motionless in the shadows, observing this display of maternal devotion. Watching Aunt Qing promise the impossible simply to comfort her beloved daughter. Watching Lian Hua cry in the protective arms of someone who would sacrifice anything to shield her from suffering. A small, cold part of my heart felt bitterly envious. I had never known that kind of unconditional protection. After Aunt Qing finally left, Lian Hua sat up slowly, wiped away her tears with an embroidered handkerchief, and looked almost relieved despite her pale face. Mother loves me more than anything, she said with a trembling but satisfied smile. All I need to do is cry convincingly, and she can't bear to see me suffer. Then she sighed dramatically and collapsed back onto her mountain of silk pillows. Poor Kaiyang. He was so absolutely perfect. She used past tense already, writing him off as effectively dead. If I were in her privileged position, I thought privately, I wouldn't surrender so easily. I would have gone to visit him personally to assess whether he was truly dying or merely unconscious with potential for recovery. I would have volunteered immediately to marry him early, claiming it would bring auspicious fortune to aid his recovery. That strategy would have secured both love and unshakable loyalty simultaneously. If Kaiyang miraculously lived, I'd be celebrated as the devoted wife who saved him through unwavering faith and dedication. If he died and the crown prince eventually ascended to emperor, my position would remain secure through that noble sacrifice. Remarriage would be complicated certainly, but far from impossible. I'd be the tragic young widow who tried valiantly to save the empire's greatest hero. But of course, I couldn't speak such thoughts aloud anywhere Lianhua might hear. If I dared suggest she was being cowardly, she would destroy me completely without hesitation. The poor relation never criticizes the wealthy cousin. That's fundamental survival rule number 1. Aunt Ching returned exactly 1 week later. This time she wasn't alone. Beside her walked a rail-thin, severe-looking woman in dark robes embroidered with silver thread, Madame Lin, the head stewardess who managed the entire Duke of Eastern Wind's household with an iron fist. When Aunt Ching gathered all the unmarried girls of the Chen family into the main ceremonial hall, and Madame Lin sat beside her wearing an expression like winter ice over bottomless water, I understood the situation immediately and completely. Aunt Ching was selling one of us to the Duke's mansion like livestock at market, and Madame Lin was here to select which girl would be acceptable. Aunt Ching had been born into the prestigious Wang family of the southern provinces. Her bloodline was nearly as illustrious as certain imperial family branches. The Duke's household wouldn't dare antagonize her family openly, especially not now when they desperately needed the Wang family's continued political and financial support for the Crown Prince's faction. If Aunt Ching promised that whichever Chen girl married Kaiyang, both the Chen and Wang families would continue backing the Crown Prince's political faction vigorously, then for the sake of political stability, the Duke's household would swallow this bitter arrangement and accept the substitute bride without public complaint. Report your birth dates using the traditional 8 characters of destiny, Aunt Ching commanded coldly. The 8 characters, the precise hour, day, month, and year of birth that fortune-tellers use to predict compatibility, fate, and whether a marriage would bring prosperity or catastrophic disaster. One by one, my various cousins recited their birth information. Their voices trembled with barely contained fear. They understood perfectly that any of them might be selected to marry a dying man, possibly to be buried alive alongside his corpse. None dared lie about their birth information. Aunt Ching had undoubtedly already sent trusted servants to verify everyone's details from official family genealogy records. Anyone caught lying would face punishment far worse than the arranged marriage itself. I noticed that Madame Lin sat perfectly motionless as the first 15 girls reported their information. Her face revealed absolutely nothing. She didn't even appear to be listening carefully. But when my turn came and I recited my birth date and time clearly, she lifted her delicate teacup and took one small, deliberate sip. Her eyes flicked toward me for just a brief moment, studying me with the penetrating intensity of a jade merchant appraising a potentially valuable stone. Then she looked away calmly and set her cup down with a soft clink. When all 26 of us had finished reporting, Aunt Ching rose smoothly to her feet. Her elaborate silk robes whispered softly against the polished floor. "One of you will be selected to marry into the Duke's household," she announced in a tone that brooked no argument. "To bring auspicious fortune to young Lord Kaiyang through your favorable destiny. This is a tremendous honor for our entire family. A great honor indeed." That's what she called it. Selling one of us like a pig at the butcher's market, calling it honor and privilege. Several of my cousins began crying quietly, trying to muffle their sobs. Someone's teeth were chattering audibly from pure terror. "Is anyone willing to volunteer?" Aunt Ching asked with false gentleness. "To marry into the Duke's household and bring blessings to the young lord." The crying intensified immediately. Someone sobbed openly. Someone else looked like they might faint from fear. I felt Madame Lin's sharp eyes settle on me with unmistakable focus. She lifted her teacup again but didn't drink this time. Just tapped the porcelain lid rhythmically with her long fingers. Tap tap tap. Was she signaling me specifically, or was the gesture meaningless? I hesitated for exactly 3 racing heartbeats, rapidly calculating odds and outcomes. If I volunteered boldly, I could potentially negotiate better terms for my family. If I stayed silent and was chosen anyway without volunteering, I'd have absolutely no leverage at all. The risk was enormous and terrifying. Kaiyang might die tomorrow or next week. The Duke's family might decide a living sacrifice was required according to ancient tradition. I could end up poisoned or strangled within mere weeks of the wedding ceremony. But if I didn't seize this dangerous opportunity, my entire family would continue starving slowly. My brothers would lose their hard-won academy positions. My father would lose his minor government job. We'd plunge back into crushing poverty so deep and dark that my younger sisters would inevitably be sold to settle mounting debts. And beyond mere survival, beyond just escaping poverty, there was genuine opportunity hidden within this danger. If Kaiyang somehow lived, I'd be married to the future Duke of Eastern Winds, nephew to the Emperor himself, cousin to the Crown Prince. Even if Kaiyang died as expected, I'd be a young widow from the Duke's household with powerful political connections and social standing. Either way, I would never be a desperate beggar again. I stepped forward decisively. "I'm willing," I said clearly. My voice didn't shake or waver. "I'm willing to marry into the Duke's household and bring favorable fortune to young Lord Kaiyang." The sound of Madame Lin setting down her teacup echoed loudly in the sudden profound silence. The crying stopped abruptly. Every servant held their breath. Everyone stared at me like I just volunteered to jump into an active volcano. Aunt Ching's carefully controlled expression flickered rapidly. Surprise, then quick calculation, then something almost resembling satisfaction. Madame Lin stood slowly and gracefully. When she spoke, her voice was thin but razor-sharp, like a blade carefully disguised in silk wrapping. "What a kind and loyal girl. On behalf of my young master, I thank you sincerely for your selfless devotion." Her words praised me superficially, but by contrast they condemned Lianhua's refusal implicitly. Madame Lin turned formally to Aunt Ching. "Madame Chen, we will take this one. Here are the original marriage contract and betrothal token for the previous engagement. Please destroy the contract and return our family's token appropriately." As she spoke these formal words, Madame Lin carefully tore Kaiyang and Lianhua's elaborate marriage contract into tiny pieces, letting them fall like bitter snow. Aunt Ching gestured sharply to her personal maid, who bowed deeply and hurried off to fetch something, presumably the jade pendant that had served as Kaiyang's betrothal gift to Lianhua. Aunt Ching dabbed at her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief, though I saw absolutely no actual tears. "Good girl, Maya," she said with smooth calculation. "Tell your aunt what you want in return for this sacrifice." Could I ask for everything I desperately needed? I thought greedily. But I wasn't stupid enough to overreach. "I'd like a more generous dowry than my station would normally warrant," I said carefully, measuring each word. "I'm still a Chen, even if from a minor branch. I'd like to be married from the main family residence with proper ceremony and respect, not from my father's crumbling courtyard. And I'd like my family properly taken care of. Secure positions for my brothers, regular medicine for my grandmother, a decent house for my parents." I watched Aunt Ching's face carefully for any sign of anger or refusal. Would she find me too greedy and presumptuous? Would she rescind the offer entirely? But she nodded with something almost resembling approval. "Reasonable requests. It shall be done as you ask." She paused, studying me with new assessment. "The Duke's household has also agreed to additional terms. If you successfully bring good fortune to young Lord Kaiyang, if he recovers his health, you'll be properly acknowledged and respected as his legitimate wife. The ceremony has already been scheduled for 3 days from now. A carriage will come for you tomorrow morning at dawn. 3 days. Not 3 months, not even 3 weeks. They wanted me married to Kaiyang immediately before he died. The fortune-tellers must have declared his fate was hanging by the thinnest thread and desperately needed an auspicious marriage to anchor it to life. Or perhaps they simply wanted someone legally bound to him before he breathed his final breath, so the funeral arrangements would be simpler and less politically complicated. I bowed deeply with perfect form. "Thank you sincerely, Aunt. I won't disappoint our family." As I walked carefully back to my place among the other girls, my various cousins stared at me like I'd suddenly grown a second head or transformed into something unrecognizable. Some looked pitying. Others looked intensely relieved that they'd escaped this fate. Lianhua, sitting on her cushioned chair, looked deathly pale and wouldn't meet my eyes at all. That night, I returned to my family's cramped, deteriorating courtyard. My mother wept uncontrollably when I told her the news. My grandmother clutched my hand with her frail fingers and called me a good filial girl who would save the family. My brothers thanked me with voices thick with guilt they couldn't fully express. My father, drunk as usual on cheap wine, laughed with bitter irony. "Finally useful for something, are you? At least you're smarter than your useless brothers combined." I didn't cry at all. I'd made my choice with completely clear eyes and full understanding of the consequences. In 3 days, I would either be the wife of a dying duke's heir, or I'd be the remarkable woman who saved him and secured my family's future for multiple generations. The wedding ceremony was profoundly strange and melancholy. A ghost marriage performed while the groom lay completely unconscious and possibly dying. The duke's mansion was staggeringly enormous, with courtyards nested within courtyards, gardens that stretched beyond what eyes could see, and servants who outnumbered the entire population of small villages. The heir's personal residence was a substantial compound unto itself, large enough to comfortably house 60 people. I was dressed elaborately in red and gold wedding robes, the traditional phoenix crown heavy on my head, but there was no joy anywhere, no celebration or happiness. Kai Yang lay motionless in his bed, his face pale as fresh paper, breathing so shallow you had to watch very closely to detect any chest movement. He was beautiful even hovering near death. Strong, elegant features, long dark hair spread across silk pillows like spilled ink. The powerful body of a trained warrior visible even beneath heavy blankets. But his eyes remained closed, and the physicians said grimly he might never open them again. I performed all the traditional bows alone. To heaven and earth, to his parents standing stiffly, to him lying there like a corpse already prepared for burial. The Duchess, Kaiyan's mother, Lady Rui Shun, watched the entire ceremony with red-rimmed, exhausted eyes. She looked at me not with gratitude, but with the desperate, drowning hope of someone clutching at anything to stay afloat. After the ceremony concluded, I was escorted to Kaiyan's private quarters. The steward explained quietly that I should sleep in the adjacent room for propriety, but spend substantial time each day sitting with Kai Yang, reading to him, playing music, anything that might call his wandering spirit back to his body. That first night, I sat carefully beside his bed and looked at my unconscious husband. So this was Kai Yang Shin, the legendary warrior, the crown prince's most trusted companion and guard. Lianhua's abandoned dream. "I don't know if you can hear anything I'm saying," I said quietly into the silence. "But I'm Maya, your wife now. I'm from a minor branch of the Chen family. Nobody special or important. Nobody you would have chosen if you'd been conscious." I took his cold hand carefully in mine. It felt like touching ice. "But I didn't volunteer to marry you purely out of selfless devotion. I did it to save my family from literal starvation. I did it for opportunity and advancement. So I'm going to be completely honest with you about everything. If you die, I'll mourn you with proper ceremony and live as well as possible as your widow. But I would much rather you lived and recovered." I squeezed his hand gently. "Because if you live, I won't just be a pathetic poor relation anymore. I'll be the wife who saved you against all odds. And together we could accomplish great things." No response at all. Just that barely perceptible shallow breathing. But I came back the next day, and the day after that, and every single day following. I read to him from the philosophical classics. I played haunting music on the guzheng that servants brought to his room. I talked to him about absolutely everything and nothing. Court gossip I'd overheard, weather changes, funny incidents I observed in the gardens, my hopes and fears. I learned the complex rhythms of his household, carefully observing which servants were genuinely loyal, which were merely going through required motions, which physicians truly cared about saving him, and which were primarily protecting their own professional reputations by predicting his inevitable death. The Duchess came often to visit her dying son. At first, she regarded me with polite but cold distance. But as weeks slowly passed, and I never wavered in faithfully attending Caiyang, never complained about my fate, never cried or made scenes, something in her severe expression gradually softened. "You're a genuinely good girl, Maya," she said unexpectedly one afternoon. "Better than we deserved to receive. Whatever happens ultimately, I'll make absolutely sure you're taken care of properly." I bowed deeply with sincere respect. "Thank you, Mother. But I'm doing this for him specifically, not for any reward." That was partially true. I genuinely did want Caiyang to live, not merely for my own benefit, but because in the time I'd spent reading to his unconscious body, I'd developed a protective feeling toward him, like he was a profound responsibility I'd voluntarily accepted and absolutely refused to abandon. 2 months after the ghost wedding, I was reading poetry aloud when his finger twitched slightly. I froze completely, staring at his hand. Had I imagined it? Then his eyelid fluttered weakly. "Get the physician immediately," I screamed. "Someone get the physician right now." Servants came running from every direction. Within minutes, the chief imperial physician arrived, then the Duchess, then the Duke himself, the head steward, half the entire household staff. Caiyang's eyes opened slowly, confused and disoriented, struggling to focus on anything. The physician examined him quickly but thoroughly, checking his pulse at multiple points, examining his eyes carefully, asking simple questions. "What happened to me?" Caiyang's voice was barely a hoarse whisper, rough from 3 months of disuse. "You were severely injured protecting the crown prince, my lord," the physician explained gently. "You've been unconscious for nearly 3 months." Caiyang's eyes moved slowly around the crowded room, taking in all the anxious faces. Then his gaze landed directly on me, kneeling beside his bed. "Who are you?" he asked with confusion. "Your wife, my lord," I said softly and clearly. "My name is Maya." Profound confusion flickered across his exhausted face. "Wife?" "But I was engaged to," the Duchess stepped forward quickly, cutting him off. "Rest now, my precious son. We'll explain everything when you're stronger and can understand better." Over the following difficult weeks, as Caiyang slowly regained his strength bit by bit, the full complicated story emerged. How Lianhua had refused to marry him when he was dying. How I had volunteered boldly in her place. How I'd spent 3 entire months sitting faithfully by his bedside, reading and playing music, never wavering or giving up hope. Caiyang's reaction to learning about Lianhua's betrayal was complicated and painful to witness. I watched anger flash hot across his face, then something much colder settle in permanently. Disappointment perhaps, or simply mature understanding that the woman he'd been engaged to was never real, just a beautiful fantasy he'd created in his mind. His reaction to me was equally complicated and layered. "I don't know whether I should thank you or apologize to you," he said one quiet afternoon when we were finally alone together. We were sitting in the garden. He could walk now with support from a carved wooden cane, though his right arm still hadn't regained full strength or flexibility. The physician said gravely it might never fully recover. The sword wound had cut far too deep, severing tendons and nerves. "You can do both," I said lightly, trying to ease the tension. "Thank me for volunteering willingly. Apologize that I had to." He laughed genuinely, the first time I'd heard him laugh at all. "You're refreshingly honest. I appreciate that more than you know. Would you prefer I pretend this was a romantic love match?" I asked directly. "That I've secretly adored you from afar for years. That would certainly be a more comfortable lie." "No," he said quietly but firmly. "I've had more than enough of comfortable lies to last several lifetimes." We sat together in comfortable silence for a while, listening to birds and wind in the garden. Then he said thoughtfully, "The physicians told me you sat with me every single day without fail. That you talked to me constantly, read to me, played beautiful music. That even when they declared I would certainly die, you absolutely refused to leave my side." "I made a commitment," I said simply. "And honestly, I was curious to see if you'd prove all those pessimistic physicians wrong." I smiled slightly. You did. So now you owe me a debt. He looked at me carefully, this strange unexpected wife he'd never chosen, and something fundamental shifted in his expression. I suppose I do owe you, he agreed. What would you like as payment? Teach me, I said immediately. Everything you know about military strategy, about political maneuvering, about managing this vast estate efficiently. I'm your wife now legally. I should learn how to be genuinely useful to you beyond just sitting vigil at bedsides. He studied me intently for a long moment, then nodded slowly with growing respect. All right, I agree. But in return, you have to promise me something important. What? Be completely honest with me about everything. Always. I can handle cold hard truth far better than warm comfortable lies. I met his eyes directly and saw something I recognized immediately. Someone else who'd learned to survive by seeing reality clearly. Deal, I said firmly. And that was precisely how our real marriage actually began, not with the ghost wedding, but with this honest agreement. Recovery was painfully slow and frustrating. Kaiyang couldn't return to active military duties immediately. His damaged right arm needed many months of careful, agonizing rehabilitation. But his brilliant mind was as sharp as ever, and once he was strong enough to sit upright for extended periods, he began teaching me seriously. Politics first. The intricate, dangerous web of alliances, bitter rivalries, and complex dependencies that held the entire empire together precariously. Who genuinely supported the crown prince, who secretly backed his ambitious younger brother. Which ministers could be trusted completely, and which played both sides skillfully. The crown prince's position isn't nearly as secure as common people assume, Kaiyang explained one evening, pointing to a detailed map of the empire spread across his massive desk. His younger brother has the Empress Dowager's complete favor and controls the southern military garrisons absolutely. If the emperor dies before publicly reaffirming his chosen heir clearly, there will be catastrophic civil war. That's why you're so important, I said, following his strategic logic carefully. You're the crown prince's most visible and celebrated supporter. Your miraculous recovery isn't merely personal. It's profoundly political. Exactly right. He smiled with approval. You learn remarkably quickly. I've had extensive practice, I said honestly. When you grow up desperately poor, you either learn to read situations fast and accurately, or you literally starve to death. He looked at me with newfound deep respect. Tell me everything about growing up in the minor branch. So I did, holding nothing back. I told him about mending endless dresses to buy grandmother's medicine. About constantly flattering my cousin to secure valuable scraps. About designing clothes for noble ladies who compensated me with their expensive discards. About learning to be strategically invisible when it suited my purposes and strategically visible when it benefited my family. You're a natural strategist, he said when I finished my story. You've been fighting your own war all along, just on a completely different battlefield. I suppose so, I admitted. But I prefer your kind of war honestly. The rules are clearer and more straightforward. He laughed hard at that. Are they really? I'm not entirely sure about that assessment. Estate management came next in my education. The Duke's household was vast almost beyond comprehension. Lands across 4 provinces, profitable businesses in every major city, literally thousands of workers and tenant farmers depending on us. The head steward handled daily operational matters, but Kaiyang was supposed to oversee everything strategically. And as his wife, I needed to understand the full scope comprehensively. The estate runs on 3 fundamental things, Kaiyang explained patiently. Land, which provides stable reliable income through farming. Trade, which generates substantial wealth but carries significant risk. And political connections, which open doors and create opportunities others can't access. And we have all 3, I noted carefully. For now, at least. But fortunes can change rapidly and unexpectedly. That's precisely why Mother manages the household finances so carefully. Every expense meticulously recorded, every asset carefully considered and protected. If civil war comes, we'll desperately need those reserves. I absorbed everything he taught me like a dry sponge desperately drinking water. Military strategy and tactics, complex financial planning, sophisticated court etiquette for the highest levels of nobility. He was remarkably patient when I asked endless questions and refreshingly frank when I made inevitable mistakes. And somewhere during those intense months of teaching and learning, our relationship shifted fundamentally from strangers bound by desperate necessity to genuine partners with deep mutual respect. He told me about his years serving as the Crown Prince's personal guard, about brutal battles he'd fought and good men he'd lost. I told him about the countless humiliations I'd endured and the small but significant victories I'd won. We played strategic chess late into the night, testing theories and tactics. We discussed politics over breakfast, debating intensely which ministers were truly trustworthy. The Duchess noticed the profound change between us. One day, she pulled me aside privately. "You've been remarkably good for him, Mayor," Lady Rui said with genuine warmth. "Better than that spoiled, shallow girl ever would have been. Kaiyang needs someone strong, someone who won't break easily under pressure and adversity. I believe you might be exactly that person." "I hope so, Mother," I said sincerely. "I'm trying my absolute best." "Keep trying," she smiled and squeezed my hand. "And call me Mother properly now without hesitation. You've truly earned it." 6 months after Kaiyang miraculously woke up, he could hold a sword again competently. Not at full strength yet, but enough to practice basic forms. I watched him drill in the training courtyard, his movements still slightly stiff and compensating, but improving visibly daily. "You should learn too," he said, noticing me watching intently. "Learn what specifically?" "Sword fighting. Basic self-defense techniques. The world is genuinely dangerous, especially for a duchess in waiting who might have political enemies. So he taught me that too, patiently and thoroughly. How to break various holds and grips. Where to strike to temporarily disable an attacker. How to move with balance and deliberate intention. You're naturally graceful," he noted approvingly after one intense session. "Years of dance training helps considerably." I wiped sweat from my face. "Everything helps eventually. That's what I've learned. There's no truly useless knowledge, only knowledge you haven't needed yet." He studied me with that deep assessing look he got sometimes. "Mayor, let me ask you something serious. If you could have absolutely anything, anything at all, what would it be?" I thought very carefully before answering. A year ago, I would have said simply enough food to eat or medicine for grandmother. But my family had been properly taken care of now. We had a decent house. My brothers had real promising futures. My parents would never experience hunger again. Security that absolutely can't be taken away, I said finally. Not just for me personally, but for everyone I care about deeply. I want to build something so strong and unshakable that even if entire empires fall apart, we'll survive and thrive. "Ambitious," he said thoughtfully. "Is that a criticism?" "Absolutely not." He smiled warmly. "It's a genuine compliment. Ambition means you'll never settle for less than you're truly worth." 8 months after waking, Kaiyang received a formal summons to the imperial palace. The crown prince wanted to see him personally. He dressed in his finest ceremonial robes, but I could see the tension in his shoulders clearly. This would be the first time facing the man he'd nearly died protecting. The first time in formal court since the assassination attempt. "Will you be all right?" I asked with concern. "I will," he said. "But Mayor, while I'm gone, be extremely careful. Now that I've recovered fully, there will be people who see you as a genuine threat." "A threat? I'm nobody important." "No," he said quietly but intensely. "You're the woman who saved the crown prince's most important military supporter. You're the woman who replaced Lian Hua, which means you embarrassed both the Chen Main family and the powerful Wang family publicly. You're the woman who gained the Duchess's complete favor and trust. That makes you dangerous to certain people with their own agendas." I felt cold despite the warm afternoon. What should I do? Trust the Duchess absolutely. Trust the servants who've been loyal to our household for many years. And don't trust anyone else easily. He touched my cheek gently. Especially don't trust Lian Hua if she comes calling. She'll want something from you. I understand completely. He left at dawn the next morning. I watched his carriage disappear through the massive gates and felt profound unease settling in my chest. Kaiyang was absolutely right to warn me. 2 days after he departed for the palace, Aunt Qing came to visit without any warning. She arrived like she owned the place, sweeping into the Duke's mansion with the supreme entitlement of someone who'd never been denied anything. I was in the gardens practicing calligraphy when a servant came running breathlessly. "Lady Mayor, Madam Qing Chen is in the main receiving hall demanding to see you immediately." Demanding, not politely requesting. Very interesting indeed. I took my time getting ready, changing into formal robes appropriate for receiving highborn guests. When I entered the hall exactly 20 minutes later, Aunt Qing was sitting with perfect rigid posture, drinking tea like she owned the mansion. "Aunt Qing," I said, bowing correctly but not excessively. "This visit is quite unexpected." "Mayor," her smile didn't reach her cold eyes at all. "Look at you now. Quite the elegant fine lady. The Duke's mansion suits you remarkably well." "I'm blessed to serve my husband and his honorable family," I said neutrally and carefully. "Yes, blessed indeed." She set down her teacup with deliberate precision. "I've come to discuss a matter of some delicacy." "Oh." I waited silently. There was definitely a trap coming. "The Chen family, all of us really, are quite grateful for your noble sacrifice. Marrying young Lord Kaiyang when he was at death's door, sitting faithful vigil for months. Very admirable and commendable." I waited. There was absolutely a but coming. "But," she continued smoothly, "now that Lord Kaiyang has recovered completely, it might be appropriate to reconsider the arrangement thoughtfully." I kept my face perfectly blank and unrevealing. "Reconsider how exactly, Aunt?" Lianhua was his intended all along, chosen carefully. The engagement between them was made years ago by both families based on extensive fortune-telling and compatibility. Your marriage to Lord Kaiyang was an emergency measure, a kind substitution meant to save his life temporarily, not to permanently replace the proper match. Ah, so that was her game. Now that Kaiyang had recovered and reclaimed his position as heir, Aunt Qing wanted to swap me out for Lianhua, give the glorious prize to her daughter after all the danger had passed. "Aunt," I said very carefully, "I don't think I have any authority to reconsider my own legal marriage. That would require Lord Kaiyang's explicit agreement, the Duke's formal approval, an imperial sanction since this involves the Crown Prince's closest ally. It's not a simple matter at all." "Of course it's not simple," Aunt Qing said with false smoothness. "But with the right incentives and arrangements, complicated things can be managed." "What would you want, Mayor?" "A generous financial settlement. A good second marriage to someone appropriate for your actual station. Land. Gold. Name your price." She was trying to buy me off completely, offering to pay me like I was a merchant's daughter who'd married above her station and could be easily bribed to step aside quietly. Anger burned hot in my chest, but I kept my voice perfectly level and controlled. "Aunt, I appreciate your supposed concern for my future. But I made sacred vows before heaven and earth. I'm Lord Kaiyang's wife in the eyes of our ancestors and the Empire. That's not something that can be casually negotiated away with gold." Aunt Qing's expression hardened into something ugly. "Don't be foolish, girl. You're still just a minor branch nobody. Lianhua is the main line with powerful connections you could never match. If you refuse to cooperate, I can make your life extremely difficult." "Can you?" I met her eyes directly without flinching. "I'm the daughter-in-law of the Duke of Eastern Winds now. The Duchess herself calls me daughter. Lord Kaiyang trusts me completely. The Crown Prince knows I personally saved his closest friend's life. What exactly do you think you can do to me that wouldn't bring absolute ruin upon yourself and your family?" Heavy silence. Aunt Qing's face flushed dark with rage. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly. "You ungrateful little wretch. We raised you from absolute poverty. Gave you everything. You gave me scraps and called it kindness," I said quietly but firmly. "I worked desperately for every single thing I have now. And now that I've built something real from nothing, you want to take it away and give it to Lianhua, who was too cowardly to marry Kaiyang when it actually mattered. How dare you speak to me this way?" "I dare because I'm not a beggar anymore," I interrupted cleanly. "I'm the future Duchess of Eastern Winds, and you have absolutely no power here." Aunt Qing stared at me, breathing hard with fury. For a long moment I genuinely thought she might strike me. Then she turned sharply and swept out of the hall without another word. After she left, I sat down shakily. My hands were trembling from adrenaline. Lady Rui appeared from an adjacent room where she'd apparently been listening to the entire confrontation. "Extremely well done," she said with approval. "I was prepared to intervene, but you handled that absolutely perfectly. You heard everything. The servants warned me she was here making outrageous demands. I wanted to see how you'd respond." She smiled warmly. "You've come a very long way from the timid girl who volunteered to marry my dying son." "I was never timid," I said honestly. "Just careful about when to show my teeth." She laughed delightedly. "Good, because Qing Chen will try again. She won't give up this easily." "What should I do?" "Exactly what you're doing. Stand absolutely firm. Kaiyang chose to keep you as his wife when he woke up and learned the truth. He could have petitioned for an annulment claiming the marriage was arranged under duress, but he didn't. That tells everyone where he stands." "Why do you think he kept me?" I asked with genuine curiosity. Lady Rui studied me carefully. "Because you're useful. Because you're intelligent. Because in a world where everyone lies to Kaiyang constantly and tells him what they think he wants to hear, you tell him the truth. And probably," she smiled, "because he likes you genuinely." "Likes me," I repeated, feeling strange. "Don't act so surprised. My son isn't stupid. He recognizes a good partner when he sees one." I felt warmth spread through my chest. Not love necessarily, we hadn't reached that yet, but something better. Respect and genuine partnership. "Thank you, Mother," I said sincerely. "Don't thank me yet. Keep proving you deserve to be here." Kaiyang returned from the palace 3 days later, looking exhausted but satisfied. "The Crown Prince wants me to return to military service," he said over dinner. "Not immediately. He understands I still need more time to fully recover. But within 6 months, he wants me back in command." "That's good, isn't it?" I said. "It means he still trusts you completely." "It is good," Kaiyang agreed. "But it also means the political situation is deteriorating faster than anyone expected." He set down his chopsticks seriously. "The Crown Prince's brother grows bolder daily. If the Emperor's health fails before matters are settled, absolute chaos will erupt. So the Crown Prince needs his best commanders ready." "Exactly right. And he needs them unquestionably loyal." Kaiyang looked at me seriously. "Mayor, if I go to war, you'll be managing this entire estate in my absence. You'll represent our household at court. You'll be making decisions that affect thousands of people." "I know," I said quietly. "Are you ready for that responsibility?" I thought about the girl I'd been just a year ago. Mending endless dresses in a crumbling courtyard, pathetically grateful for scraps, invisible and completely powerless. "I'll be ready," I said firmly. "Teach me everything I need to know." So he did exactly that. For the next 6 months, Kaiyang taught me everything he could about running the vast estate, managing the complex household, navigating treacherous court politics. We worked from dawn to late evening most days. He introduced me to key people I needed to know personally. Estate managers, trade partners, military officers loyal to the Crown Prince. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, our partnership deepened into something more profound. It started small and subtle. Him taking my hand during evening walks. Me leaning against his shoulder when we worked late into the night. Conversations that shifted gradually from strategic to personal. One night, after a long exhausting day of reviewing financial records, Kaiyang said quietly, "I'm glad it was you." "What do you mean?" "I'm glad you were the one who volunteered to marry me. If Lianhua had gone through with it, I think I'd be miserable right now. She would have been disappointed that I wasn't the perfect warrior anymore. Disappointed that my arm never fully healed. She would have wanted the fantasy version of me, not the reality." "And you're content with reality?" I asked. "I prefer it," he smiled. "You've never asked me to be anything other than what I am. That's rare and precious." I touched his face gently. "I like what you are, scars and limitations and all." He kissed me then, not with desperate passion, but with genuine affection, with the slow burning warmth of two people who'd chosen each other deliberately. When he pulled back, he said, "If we're going to do this properly, we should have a real wedding ceremony. Not the ghost marriage we had before, but a celebration where I'm actually conscious and participating." I laughed. "That would be nice. And then," he said carefully, "we should probably think seriously about children. Heirs to secure our position." "Probably," I agreed. "But Kaiyang, there's something I need to tell you first." "What?" "Lianhua's mother came here while you were at the palace. She tried to convince me to step aside so Lianhua could marry you instead." His expression darkened immediately. "What did you tell her?" "I told her no. That I was your wife by law and custom and wouldn't be bought off." I paused. "Was that all right?" "All right." He pulled me close. "Maya, you're the only person who's fought for this marriage. Fought to stay. Of course that's all right. But I need you to understand why I fought," I said quietly. "It's not just because I've grown to care for you, though I have. It's because I refuse to go back to being nothing. I've worked too hard to build this life. I won't let Aunt Qing or Lianhua or anyone take it from me." "Good," he said fiercely. "Don't let them. We built this partnership together. It's ours." The real wedding ceremony happened in spring when the gardens were blooming magnificently and the weather was perfect. This time Kaiyang was awake and smiling. This time there was genuine joy instead of sorrow. This time when I bowed to heaven and earth, I was bowing beside a partner I respected deeply and was beginning to love. The Crown Prince and Crown Princess attended personally. Ministers came from across the capital. Even the Empress Dowager sent an expensive gift, a jade bracelet symbolizing her approval. Lianhua didn't come. Neither did Aunt Qing. The Chen Main family sent polite regrets and an expensive gift, but no actual representatives. I didn't care at all. I had a new family now. After the ceremony during the elaborate banquet, Lady Rui leaned close and whispered, "You've secured your position beautifully, Maya. Now make sure you have children quickly. Nothing protects a wife like sons." "I know, Mother," I said. "We're working on it." She laughed warmly. "Good girl." 3 months later, I was pregnant. The entire household rejoiced. The Duke himself came to congratulate me, rare approval in his usually stern eyes. The Duchess pampered me constantly with the finest foods and consulted the finest physicians daily. Kaiyang was simultaneously thrilled and terrified, treating me like I was made of fragile glass. "I'm pregnant, not dying," I told him when he tried to carry me upstairs for the 3rd time. "I know, but nothing. I spent 3 months sitting vigil over you when you were unconscious. You can handle me being pregnant." He laughed and kissed my forehead. "Fair point." But our joy was short-lived. Word came from the northern border. The barbarian tribes were raiding again, emboldened by rumors of instability in the capital. They'd burned villages, stolen livestock, killed imperial soldiers. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. The Crown Prince summoned Kaiyang to the palace urgently. I knew what it meant before Kaiyang came back. "I have to go," he said quietly. "The Crown Prince needs commanders he can trust absolutely. And the military situation is getting worse. If we don't push back hard now, the raids will continue until they're full-scale invasions." "How long?" I asked. "At least 6 months, possibly a year." I touched my belly, still flat but already precious. "You'll miss the birth." "I know." His voice cracked slightly. "Maya, I'm so sorry." "Don't," I took his hands. "Don't apologize for doing your duty. We both knew this was coming. I just hoped we'd have more time." "I'll come back," he promised. "I'll come back to you and our child. I swear it." "You'd better," I tried to smile. "You haven't finished teaching me everything about estate management yet. I still have so much to learn." He laughed through threatening tears. "You've learned more than most would in twice the time." "Perhaps, but I'm still struggling with the silk trade agreements. There's more you need to show me." "I'll work on it when I return," he promised. We spent his last night together quietly, just holding each other. No desperate passion, no grand declarations, just 2 people who'd built something real and didn't want to let go. The next morning, I helped him dress in his armor personally. I checked every strap, every buckle, making sure nothing would fail him in battle. Take care of mother and father for me, he said. Take care of the estate. Take care of yourself and our child. Take care of yourself first, I replied. Come back to us, Kaiyang. That's all I ask. He kissed me one last time, then mounted his horse. I stood in the courtyard and watched him ride away with his commanders and personal guard. Watched until they disappeared through the gates. Watched until the dust settled completely. Then I turned back to the mansion, one hand on my belly, and got to work. Running the Duke's vast estate while pregnant and while the heir was at war turned out to be excellent preparation for motherhood. Both required constant vigilance, strategic thinking, and the ability to function on minimal sleep. Lady Rui helped me navigate the complex responsibilities. Which decisions I could make myself, which required the Duke's approval, which needed approval from the family council. How to balance the estate's books, how to manage servants, tenants, and trade partners. How to host events that maintained our social standing and political alliances. You're doing remarkably well, she told me one evening. Better than I expected, frankly. Most young wives would have been completely overwhelmed. I learned from the best, I said. You and Kaiyang taught me well. We taught you the basics. You're exceeding them through your own skill. She smiled. My son chose better than he knew. As my pregnancy advanced, so did the political situation in the capital. The emperor's health was declining rapidly. The crown prince's position was precarious. His brother was making increasingly aggressive moves, courting generals and ministers. And Kaiyang was at the border, far from court, unable to participate in the maneuvering that would determine who became the next emperor. I attended court events as the Duke's representative since neither Kaiyang nor the Duke himself could be present. The Duke had taken ill with age. I smiled and chatted with other noble ladies. I listened far more than I spoke. I gathered intelligence about which families were shifting their allegiances, and I sent careful coded letters to Kaiyang, keeping him informed. When I was 7 months pregnant, Lianhua came to visit. It had been nearly 2 years since we'd seen each other. She looked thinner and worn, not the pampered beauty she'd once been. But her eyes held the same mixture of desperation and entitlement I remembered from when Aunt Qing had tried to buy me off. Sister Maya, she said formally when I received her in the hall. Lianhua, I didn't invite her to sit. What do you want? She looked surprised at my directness. I came to apologize for what happened. For how mother treated you. You came to apologize, I repeated flatly. After 2 years. While Kaiyang is at war and I'm about to give birth. How convenient. Maya, please what? I stood up awkwardly, my pregnant belly making graceful movement impossible. Please forgive you for trying to take my husband. Please pretend your mother didn't try to buy me off like a merchant's daughter. Please welcome you with open arms. I made mistakes, she said, tears forming. I was scared and stupid and I made the wrong choice. But I've paid for it. No one will marry me now. I'm 23 and unwanted. My own family treats me like a burden. I have nothing. You had everything, I said coldly. Everything I fought and scraped for, you had from birth. And you threw it away out of cowardice. I know. Don't you think I know that? She was crying openly now. I think about it every day. I dream about Kaiyang, about the life I could have had. Stop. I held up a hand. I don't want to hear about your regrets. Kaiyang is my husband. This life is mine. You made your choices. Live with them. Just let me see him once when he returns. Let me apologize to him properly. No. Maya, get out, I said quietly. And don't come back. You're not welcome in this household. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. Then she turned and fled. After she left, I sat down heavily, one hand on my belly where the baby was kicking. Your father's former fiancé just visited, I told my unborn child. She wanted forgiveness and second chances. I gave her neither. Am I cruel, little one, or just practical? The baby kicked again as if in response. I'll take that as approval, I said with a tired smile. Kaiyang returned 6 months after leaving for the border and 3 months after I gave birth to our son. I named him Zhen Shun after careful consultation with the Duke's family astrologer. A strong name, a fortunate name, a name that would serve him well whether he became a duke or a general. The Duchess had been with me during the birth, holding my hand through the pain. He has his father's spirit, she'd said when Jean first cried. Strong and determined. Now, seeing Kai Yang walk into the nursery and lay eyes on his son for the first time, I watched his face transform completely. A son, he breathed. Your son, I confirmed. Come meet him. Kai Yang approached slowly, still wearing travel dust, looking uncertain. I placed Jean in his arms carefully. His perfect, Kai Yang whispered. Mayor, his absolutely perfect. He has your eyes, I noted. And my stubborn temperament, the nurses say. He screams when he's hungry and won't settle until he gets what he wants. Kai Yang laughed. Definitely your son, then. He looked at me with such open love that it took my breath away. I missed you, he said. Every day at the border, I missed you. Wondered if you were all right, if the baby was healthy, if you'd forgiven me for leaving. Nothing to forgive, I said. You did your duty. So did I. And now we're together again. Together, he repeated, like the word was sacred. The campaign had been successful. The barbarian tribes were pushed back decisively. Their leaders killed or captured. The border secured. Kai Yang came back with glory, new honors, and the crown prince's deepest gratitude. But he also came back changed. Harder, more careful, with eyes that had seen too much death. The war isn't over, he told me privately. The border is secure, but the capital. Mayor, I think the emperor is dying. Yes. And when that happens, the real war will begin between the crown prince and his brother. Every family, every general, every minister will have to choose a side. There won't be any neutral ground. Then we choose the crown prince, I said firmly. We've already committed too much to that alliance to back out now. Even if it means we might lose everything. If his brother wins, we could be executed as traitors. I looked at our son sleeping peacefully in his cradle. Then we'd better make sure the crown prince wins. Kai Yang smiled grimly. My practical wife. Always seeing clearly. Someone has to. I took his hand. Tell me what you need me to do. So we planned. For months we planned, preparing for the succession crisis we knew was coming. Securing allies, stockpiling resources, making contingency plans for different scenarios. And we were right to prepare. When the emperor died 8 months later, the capital exploded into chaos. The crown prince claimed the throne based on tradition and the late emperor's spoken decree. His brother claimed it based on the Empress Dowager's support and control of the southern armies. Civil war erupted within days. Kai Yang left immediately to command the crown prince's forces in the north. I remained in the capital, managing the estate, coordinating supply lines, gathering intelligence through networks of servants and merchants. It was terrifying and brutal. The city filled with soldiers from both sides. Families were torn apart based on their loyalties. Ministers were executed in the streets. Even minor nobles weren't safe. Simply being suspected of supporting the wrong prince could get you killed. I kept Jean hidden in the safest part of the mansion with Lady Rui, surrounded by guards we trusted absolutely. I attended court when required, smiled and maintained neutrality in public while secretly coordinating with the crown prince's faction. The war lasted 9 months. 9 months of bloody battles, sieges, betrayals. 9 months of wondering each day if Kai Yang was still alive. 9 months of terror that the wrong side might win and we'd all be executed. But in the end, the crown prince's forces prevailed. His brother was killed in the final battle. The Empress Dowager was exiled to a remote temple. The surviving supporters of the losing side were either executed or stripped of their positions. And the crown prince ascended the throne as emperor. Kai Yang came back to the capital a war hero. The new emperor promoted him to general of the northern armies and granted our family additional lands and honors. We had survived. More than survived. We had risen. 6 years after that desperate wedding ceremony where I married an unconscious man, I stood in the Duke's mansion, now my mansion since the old Duke had passed away and Kai Yang inherited the title, and looked at everything I'd built. Jean was 5 years old, bright and energetic, already learning to read and write. I was pregnant again with our second child. Yang had become one of the most powerful military commanders in the empire. Our estates were prosperous. Our family was secure. The Chenmain family had fallen on hard times. Without the protection of Yan's connection, which they'd forfeited when Lianhua refused to marry him, they'd bet on the wrong prince during the civil war. Most of their lands were confiscated. Their influence evaporated. Aunt Qing had died during the war. Some said from shame, others from a convenient illness that struck when her faction was losing. Lianhua had been married off to a minor merchant far below her former station. I felt no satisfaction in their downfall, just a strange emptiness. They'd been so powerful once, so untouchable. And now they were nothing. "You're thinking too hard," Yang said, coming up behind me and wrapping his arms around my pregnant belly. "Just reflecting," I said, "on how far we've come." "We've come far," he agreed. "But I think you've come furthest. From a side branch nobody to the Duchess of Eastern Winds, wife of a duke, mother of the next generation. You've exceeded every limitation anyone tried to put on you." "We did it together," I corrected. "No," he turned me to face him. "I helped. But you're the one who fought for this. You're the one who volunteered to marry a dying man when everyone else ran. You're the one who sat vigil for 3 months. You're the one who managed an entire estate while pregnant and alone. This success is yours as much as mine." I leaned against him, feeling the baby kick. "I suppose I did prove everyone wrong." "You proved yourself right," he said. "That's better." That evening, as I put Shen to bed, he asked, "Mama, why do the other children call me the Phoenix Boy?" "Because," I said, smoothing his hair, "your father was like a phoenix. Everyone thought he would die, but he came back to life. And you're his son, strong and resilient like him. Will I be a duke someday?" "Yes, and a good one, I hope. One who remembers that power is a responsibility, not just a privilege. Like you and Papa." "Exactly like me and Papa." After Jean fell asleep, I went to the study where I kept my private journals. Page after page of records. Every decision I'd made, every alliance I'd forged, every challenge I'd overcome. I picked up my brush and wrote. Today, Jean asked why they call him the Phoenix Boy. I told him about his father's resurrection, but I could have told him a different story. About a girl who rose from nothing to become everything. About learning that the greatest power isn't in your birth or your bloodline, but in your willingness to take risks when everyone else runs away. I was born into poverty and neglect. I survived on scraps and cleverness. I married a dying man and helped him live. I built an empire from desperation and determination. And I would do it all again in a heartbeat, because this rugged, uneven road I walked with all my wits from age 15 until now has finally leveled out. So what is there to fear from here on? May Shen, Duchess of Eastern Winds, go forward without fear. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Lotus Tale Studios for more powerful stories every single day. Thanks for watching.